In the year 2147, Earth was no longer the peaceful planet it once was. The skies were filled with strange ships and the ground shook under the weight of massive alien creatures known as the Vorthak. These invaders had come without warning, their arrival marked by destruction and chaos. Cities burned, armies crumbled, and people ran for their lives. The Vorthak were unlike anything humanity had ever faced before. Towering over humans, they moved with terrifying speed and wielded weapons far beyond anything on Earth. Their armor seemed impenetrable, and their sheer size made them nearly unstoppable. For months, humanity fought back with everything it had. Fighter jets screamed across the skies, missiles streaked through the air, and soldiers charged bravely into battle. But none of it mattered. The Vorthak swept through defenses like they were nothing. Entire armies were wiped out in days. Governments fell one after another, leaving survivors to fend for themselves. It felt like the end of the world. No one knew how to stop these invaders. Hope began to fade, replaced by despair. But deep in, the heart of what remained of Washington, D.C., a young officer named Laura Bennett sat in a dimly lit room. She stared at an old photograph on her desk. It showed a group of soldiers standing proudly after a long-forgotten war. At the center of the picture was a man named William Carter. He wasn't just any soldier. He was a legend. Decades earlier, William had been a general known for his brilliant strategies and calm leadership. Battles that seemed impossible to win were turned around because of his careful planning and quick thinking. Now, he was 82 years old, retired, and living quietly in a small town. But Laura believed he was humanity's last chance. Laura stood up and straightened her uniform. Her superiors didn't agree with her plan, but she didn't care. She drove for hours until she reached William's home. It was a modest house surrounded by trees, a stark contrast to the devastation happening elsewhere. When William opened the door, he looked surprised to see her. His hair was white, and his face was lined with age, but his eyes still held a spark of sharpness. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice steady. "I'm Lieutenant Laura Bennett," she said, introducing herself. "I've been sent by the United Nations Defense Council." William raised an eyebrow. "Sent for what?" "To ask for your help," Laura replied. "We're losing this war. Every day more cities fall, more people die. We need someone who can think differently, someone who knows how to fight smarter, not harder. That's you." William sighed and stepped aside, letting her in. They sat down in his living room where shelves were lined with books about military history. Laura explained the situation in detail, the overwhelming power of the Vorthak, the collapse of Earth's defenses, and the desperate need for a new approach. William listened silently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, there was a long pause. Finally, William spoke. "You want me, an 82-year-old man, to lead a war against aliens? Do you even realize how ridiculous that sounds?" "It does sound crazy," Laura admitted. "But we've tried everything else, and it hasn't worked. You're our best hope." William leaned back in his chair, lost in thought. Memories of past battles flooded his mind. Moments when he'd stood on the front lines, making decisions that changed the course of wars. Those days were long gone, but the lessons he'd learned hadn't faded. He glanced at a framed photo on the wall. It showed him standing alongside his comrades, all of them younger and full of determination. Many of those men and women were gone now, but some were still alive. And if he agreed to this, maybe they could make a difference together. "What makes you think I can do this?" William asked finally. "Because you've done it before," Laura said firmly, "and because you're not alone. There are others like you, people who served with you who know what it means to fight for something bigger than themselves. We don't need soldiers who can run fast or lift heavy weapons. We need thinkers, strategists, leaders. And that's exactly what you are." William hesitated. He knew the risks. If he failed, it wouldn't just be his life on the line. It would be the fate of the entire human race. But then he thought about the faces of the children he'd seen on the news, huddled in shelters crying for parents they might never see again. He thought about the elderly couple he'd passed on the road earlier, clutching each other as they fled their burning home. He couldn't stand by and do nothing. "All right," he said finally. "I'll do it. But I won't go alone." Over the next few days, William reached out to old friends and comrades. One of the first people he called was Margaret Klein, a former intelligence analyst who had helped crack enemy codes during her time in service. Though she was 83 now, her mind was as sharp as ever. She agreed to join immediately, eager to put her skills to use once more. Next, he contacted Harold Dixon, a gruff but dependable tank commander who had earned a reputation for his fearlessness in battle. Harold was skeptical at first, but when William explained the gravity of the situation, he didn't hesitate. "If you're going, I'm going too," he said simply. Daniel Owens was the final piece of the puzzle. A strategist with a knack for outsmarting opponents, Daniel had spent years teaching military tactics at universities. Now 81, he still had a passion for problem solving and jumped at the opportunity to contribute. Together, they formed a team unofficially dubbed the Silver Vanguard. Each member brought something unique to the table. William provided overall leadership and strategic vision. Margaret handled intelligence gathering and analysis. Harold focused on logistics and combat planning, while Daniel devised creative ways to exploit the Vorthak's weaknesses. Laura served as their liaison, keeping them connected to the remnants of Earth's resistance forces. Their first meeting took place in a secluded cabin, far from prying eyes. Maps and diagrams covered the walls, and laptops hummed softly as data streamed in from various sources. William stood at the head of the table, leaning heavily on his cane. "Listen up," he began. "This isn't going to be easy. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched in every way. But we have one advantage. They don't expect us to fight back like this. We're going to hit them where it hurts using brains instead of brawn." The others nodded, their expressions serious but determined. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew they had no choice. This wasn't just about winning a war. It was about survival. For the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope, a fragile, flickering light in the darkness, and it burned within the hearts of 4 elderly veterans and 1 young officer, ready to prove that age didn't matter when the stakes were this high. The Silver Vanguard wasted no time getting to work. William Carter, though slowed by age, moved with purpose. He gathered his team around a large table in the cabin where maps and notes were spread out. "We can't fight them head-on," he said firmly. "They're bigger, stronger, and have better weapons, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. We need to find their weak spots and hit them where it hurts." Margaret Klein was already poring over intercepted communications from the Vorthak. She had spent years decoding enemy messages during her time in service, and she quickly noticed patterns. The aliens relied heavily on low-frequency signals to communicate with each other and coordinate their attacks. "If we can disrupt those signals," Margaret explained, "we might be able to confuse them. Without clear orders, they'll fall apart." Harold Dixon nodded thoughtfully. "That's a good start. But we also need something to slow them down physically. These things are huge. If we can trap them or at least make them think twice before moving forward, it'll buy us time." Harold had always been a man of action, and his mind immediately went to practical solutions. He began sketching designs for makeshift traps using abandoned machinery and scrap metal. Daniel Owens chimed in next. "Confusion is key here. If we can mess with their heads, we'll have the upper hand. Psychological warfare isn't just for humans. It works on any intelligent species. Let's create fake targets to draw them away from real population centers." Daniel's ideas were unconventional, but they made sense. By luring the Vorthak into empty areas rigged with traps and distractions, humanity could minimize casualties while maximizing damage. Laura Bennett listened intently, taking notes and offering suggestions. Though much younger than the rest of the team, she brought energy and determination to the group. She volunteered to coordinate with surviving resistance cells across the globe, ensuring that everyone worked together instead of operating in isolation. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," she reminded them. "Every person out there is counting on us." As the days passed, The team threw themselves into preparation. Margaret worked tirelessly to modify old jamming devices, tweaking them to target the specific frequencies used by the Vorthak. Her hands trembled slightly as she soldered wires and adjusted dials, but her focus never wavered. She knew that even a small disruption in the aliens' communication network could give humanity a crucial advantage. Harold, meanwhile, scoured nearby ruins for materials to build his traps. With the help of local volunteers, he salvaged parts from wrecked vehicles and collapsed buildings. The traps weren't elegant. They were crude and brutal, designed to exploit the Vorthak's size and weight. One trap involved rigging a section of road to collapse under pressure, sending the massive creatures tumbling into deep pits lined with sharp debris. Another used tripwires to trigger explosions that would blind or disorient them temporarily. Daniel focused on creating decoy settlements. Using holographic projectors scavenged from old entertainment systems, he programmed realistic simulations of human activity. Lights flickered in windows, figures moved behind curtains, and faint sounds of conversation drifted through the air. To the Vorthak, these illusions would look like legitimate targets worth attacking. Meanwhile, the real communities would remain, hidden, protected by silence and camouflage. William oversaw everything, making sure each piece of the plan fit together seamlessly. His experience shone through as he anticipated potential problems and adjusted strategies accordingly. "We don't get a second chance at this," he told the team. "Every detail matters." Despite their age, none of the members of the Silver Vanguard showed signs of slowing down. They worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and sheer willpower. Their bodies ached and their muscles protested, but they pushed through. This wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about saving the future. Finally, the day came to put their plans into action. The chosen location was what remained of Chicago, a city that had fallen months earlier. Its streets were now a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered glass, its skyline reduced to jagged skeletons of skyscrapers. The Vorthak had turned it into a staging ground for further invasions, making it a prime target for the Silver Vanguard's first strike. Under cover of darkness, William led a small team into the heart of the alien encampment. Laura stayed behind to monitor communications and provide updates. Moving quietly, the team navigated the ruins, using mobility aids like walkers and wheelchairs to blend in with the debris-strewn environment. It was slow-going, but stealth was critical. Harold's traps were set along key routes disguised as piles of rubble. When a patrol of Vorthak soldiers lumbered into view, the team held their breath. As the aliens stepped onto the rigged sections of road, explosions erupted, sending shockwaves through their ranks. The creatures roared in confusion, stumbling over the uneven terrain as secondary traps triggered around them. At the same time, Margaret activated the signal jammers. The low-frequency hum that usually filled the air fell silent, cutting off the Vorthak's ability to communicate. Chaos spread through their ranks as orders ceased to flow and units became isolated from one another. Some aliens froze in place, unsure of what to do without guidance, while others charged blindly in random directions. Though the attack inflicted minimal casualties, its psychological impact was immense. The Vorthak, accustomed to dominating their enemies, found themselves vulnerable for the first time. They began retreating to regroup, abandoning their positions in Chicago. News of the successful strike spread quickly, carried by survivors who witnessed the event firsthand. For the first time since the invasion began, people dared to hope. Refugees whispered stories of elderly heroes who had outsmarted the invaders. Resistance fighters rallied around the Silver Vanguard's example, inspired to adopt similar tactics in their own regions. Governments that had all but given up started reaching out to William and his team, seeking advice and coordination. Back at the cabin, the team celebrated their victory cautiously. They knew this was only the beginning. The Vorthak wouldn't stay confused forever, and they still outnumbered humanity by a wide margin. But for now, they had proven that it was possible to fight back, not with brute force, but with intelligence and ingenuity. William leaned back in his chair, exhaustion etched on his face. He glanced at the others, who were equally tired but smiling faintly. "This changes things," he said softly. "They know we're still here, and we're not going anywhere." Margaret nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Let's keep hitting them. Harder, smarter, until they leave our planet for good." Harold chuckled despite his weariness. "If anyone can pull this off, it's us," Daniel added. "And we've got the whole world watching. We can't let them down." Laura looked at each of them, pride swelling in her chest. These 4 individuals, all well into their 80s, had accomplished what entire armies couldn't. They had shown that even in humanity's darkest hour, courage and cleverness could light the way forward. Encouraged by their success in Chicago, the Silver Vanguard wasted no time expanding their efforts. Word of their victory spread quickly, reaching even the most remote corners of the world. Survivors who had been hiding in fear now emerged, eager to join the fight. Resistance cells that had been operating independently began coordinating with William and his team, sharing resources and intelligence. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity started to feel like it had a chance. William, Carter knew they couldn't afford to rest. The Vorthak might have retreated from Chicago, but they were still a formidable force. Their numbers were vast, and their technology remained far superior to anything humanity possessed. However, the aliens had one glaring weakness: their rigid reliance on hierarchy and predictable patterns. William and his team decided to exploit this flaw further, training others to use similar tactics against the invaders. Margaret Klein took charge of teaching intelligence operatives how to intercept and analyze Vorthak communications. She set up makeshift classrooms in abandoned warehouses, using old radios and computers to demonstrate her techniques. Her students ranged from teenagers to middle-aged survivors, all desperate to learn how to contribute. Margaret's patience and clarity made her an excellent teacher, and soon networks of spies sprang up across the globe, feeding vital information back to the Silver Vanguard. Harold Dixon focused on training fighters in guerrilla tactics. He showed them how to build traps using whatever materials they could find: broken furniture, discarded appliances, even chunks of concrete. His lessons were practical and straightforward, emphasizing creativity over complexity. "You don't need fancy weapons to win," he told his trainees. "You just need to think smarter than your enemy." Volunteers returned to their communities armed with new skills, ready to turn their neighborhoods into labyrinths of danger for the Vorthak. Daniel Owens worked on spreading the concept of psychological warfare. He encouraged people to create decoys and illusions, convincing the Vorthak to waste time and resources attacking empty targets. Entire towns transformed into ghostly fortresses, complete with holograms and sound effects designed to mimic human activity. When the aliens arrived, expecting easy victories, they found nothing but traps and silence. Each failed assault chipped away at their confidence, sowing doubt among their ranks. Laura Bennett played a crucial role in keeping everything organized. She traveled constantly, delivering supplies, relaying messages, and ensuring that different groups stayed connected. Her presence inspired hope wherever she went. People saw her as a bridge between the legendary Silver Vanguard and the ordinary citizens fighting for survival. Though she was young, her dedication earned her respect from everyone she met. Pivotal moment came when Daniel proposed targeting the Vorthak mothership orbiting Earth. This massive vessel served as the command center for the entire invasion force. If it could be disabled even temporarily, it would cripple the aliens' ability to coordinate their attacks. The challenge was immense. The mothership was heavily guarded, and humanity's space capabilities were virtually non-existent. But Daniel believed it was worth the risk. "We've got outdated satellites and scavenged parts," he explained during a strategy meeting. "If we can rig an EMP device and get close enough to detonate it near the ship, we might be able to knock out their systems." William nodded thoughtfully. "It's risky, but it could work. We'll need someone brave enough to pilot the mission." Laura immediately volunteered. "I'll do it," she said firmly. "I know the risks, but if anyone can pull this off, it's me." William hesitated. He admired Laura's courage, but sending her into space felt like asking too much. Still, he knew she was right. Someone had to take the risk, and she was the most qualified person for the job. "All right," he said finally. "But we're not doing this alone. While you're distracting them in space, we'll launch simultaneous attacks on the ground. That should keep them busy." Preparations for the daring operation began immediately. Engineers worked around the clock to modify an old shuttle, equipping it with the EMP device and reinforcing its hull as best they could. Meanwhile, William coordinated with resistance cells worldwide, planning a series of strikes designed to draw the Vorthak's attention away from orbit. Decoy settlements were activated, holograms flickering to life as fake armies marched through the streets. Explosions erupted in strategic locations, creating chaos and confusion. On the day of the mission, Laura climbed into the shuttle, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. As the engines roared to life, she glanced down at the faces of William, Margaret, Harold, and Daniel, who had gathered to see her off. "Don't let me down," she said with a small smile. "We won't," William replied. "Good luck." The shuttle lifted off, disappearing into the sky. Below, William and his team watched anxiously as their ground assault unfolded. Resistance fighters launched coordinated attacks on multiple fronts, drawing the Vorthak into carefully laid traps. Explosions echoed in the distance and alien roars filled the air. Despite the chaos, the operation was going according to plan. In space, Laura approached the Vorthak mothership cautiously. The massive vessel loomed ahead, its surface bristling with weapons and sensors. She held her breath as she maneuvered, the shuttle closer, knowing that detection could mean instant death. Finally, she reached the optimal position and activated the EMP device. A blinding flash of energy erupted, enveloping the mothership in a surge of electromagnetic radiation. For a few tense moments, nothing happened. Then, the lights on the vessel dimmed, and its movements slowed. Communication signals ceased, and the once coordinated movements of the Vorthak fleet became erratic. On Earth, William and his team noticed the change immediately. Alien forces, suddenly cut off from their command structure, began retreating in disarray. The ground teams seized the opportunity, launching fresh waves of attacks. Traps sprang into action, explosions rocked the battlefield, and decoy settlements drew the confused aliens deeper into hostile territory. It was a turning point in the war. For the first time, humanity had gained the upper hand. Back in space, Laura guided the shuttle away from the crippled mothership, her hands trembling with relief. She had done it. Against all odds, she had succeeded. As she re-entered Earth's atmosphere, she allowed herself a brief moment of triumph. But there was no time to celebrate, not yet. When Laura returned to the cabin, she was greeted with cheers and applause. William hugged her tightly, his eyes shining with pride. "You did it," he said simply. "You gave us the edge we needed." "It wasn't just me," Laura replied. "We did it together." The victory was significant, but the Silver Vanguard knew the war wasn't over. The Vorthak were weakened but not defeated. Still, for the first time in months, there was real hope. Humanity had proven that it could fight back, not with brute strength, but with ingenuity and determination. And as long as the Silver Vanguard stood, the invaders would never underestimate their elderly adversaries again. The victory against the Vorthak mothership marked a turning point in the war, but the Silver Vanguard knew it was only the beginning. The alien forces were still powerful, and their numbers stretched across continents. However, the success of the EMP strike had shown humanity that the Vorthak could be beaten. With renewed determination, William Carter and his team began planning their next move, a final push to drive the invaders off Earth once and for all. Margaret Klein continued, her work intercepting and analyzing Vorthak communications. She discovered something critical. The aliens were growing frustrated. Their rigid command structure depended on clear orders from above, and without constant guidance, they struggled to adapt. Margaret realized this frustration could be turned into a weapon. "If we keep hitting them hard and fast, they'll start making mistakes," she told the group. "They're not used to chaos. It's their biggest weakness." Harold Dixon took this idea and ran with it. He expanded his network of traps, creating larger and more elaborate setups designed to confuse and overwhelm the Vorthak. Entire streets were rigged with explosives hidden beneath rubble, while abandoned buildings were booby-trapped to collapse when entered. Harold also trained teams of volunteers to act as decoys, drawing the aliens into ambushes where they would face relentless attacks. His motto became simple yet effective: make them think twice before stepping anywhere. Daniel Owens focused on psychological warfare, devising new ways to unnerve the invaders. He suggested using loudspeakers to broadcast eerie sounds mimicking human voices or alien distress calls. These noises played on the fears of the Vorthak, who already distrusted unfamiliar environments. Combined with holographic projections of ghostly figures moving through the ruins, these tactics made the aliens question every shadow and sound. Daniel's goal was clear: break their morale completely. Laura Bennett remained the linchpin holding everything together. She traveled tirelessly between resistance cells, ensuring everyone stayed coordinated and motivated. Her presence inspired people to keep fighting, even when the odds seemed impossible. She carried messages from one group to another, delivered supplies to those in need, and reported back to William with updates from the front lines. Though she was exhausted, Laura refused to slow down. Every victory mattered, no matter how small. As preparations intensified, William devised a bold plan. He proposed luring the remaining Vorthak forces into a massive trap by staging fake surrender negotiations. The idea was risky. There was always a chance the aliens might see through the deception, but it offered a chance to end the war decisively. If we can get them to gather in one place, William explained, we can hit them with everything we've got. It's our best shot at finishing this. The team agreed, and the operation began. Resistance fighters spread rumors of humanity's willingness to negotiate peace. Decoy signals were sent out, mimicking official transmissions from world leaders. Holograms of surrender ceremonies were projected near key locations, complete with virtual flags raised in supposed defeat. To make the illusion convincing, the Silver Vanguard instructed survivors to stop resisting temporarily, allowing the Vorthak to advance unopposed in certain areas. The ruse worked better than anyone expected. The Vorthak, eager to claim victory, after months of setbacks, began converging on what appeared to be a central meeting point outside what was once New York City. Alien ships descended from orbit, and ground troops marched toward the designated area, unaware they were walking into a deadly ambush. William and his team watched from a hidden command post as the trap unfolded. Explosions erupted all around, the gathering Vorthak forces, sending shockwaves through their ranks. Traps triggered simultaneously, collapsing roads, igniting fires, and cutting off escape routes. Above, fighter jets, salvaged and modified by human engineers, screamed across the sky, strafing the invaders with relentless fire. On the ground, resistance fighters emerged from hiding, armed with makeshift weapons and fueled by months of pent-up anger. For the first time, the Vorthak faltered. Without clear orders from their disabled mothership, they struggled to respond effectively. Some units retreated blindly, only to stumble into additional traps. Others fought back fiercely, but their efforts were scattered and disorganized. The tide had turned decisively in humanity's favor. Amid the chaos, William led a small strike team directly into the heart of the alien encampment. Using mobility aids like walkers and wheelchairs, they moved cautiously through the wreckage, setting off secondary explosions and further destabilizing the Vorthak's position. Margaret monitored communications closely, feeding real-time updates to William and his team. Harold's traps continued to wreak havoc, while Daniel's psychological tactics sowed confusion among the enemy. Laura coordinated air support, guiding pilots to target key areas and avoid civilian casualties. Her calm voice over the radio kept everyone focused, even as the battle raged around them. "Hold your positions," she instructed repeatedly. "We're winning this." By the time the dust settled, the Vorthak were in full retreat. Their remaining forces scrambled back to their ships, abandoning equipment and wounded comrades in their haste to escape. As the last alien vessel lifted off into the sky, cheers erupted from human survivors worldwide. For the first time in over a year, the skies above Earth were free of alien invaders. Back at the command post, the Silver Vanguard gathered to assess the situation. William leaned heavily on his cane, exhaustion etched on his face, but his eyes sparkled with pride. "We did it," he said softly. "Against all odds, we pushed them back." Margaret nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And we showed them they can't mess with us." Harold chuckled, despite his weariness. "Let's hope they remember that lesson if they ever come back." Daniel added, "This isn't just about today. It's about tomorrow. We've proven we can protect ourselves, and we'll do it again if we have to." Laura looked at each of them, overwhelmed with gratitude. These 4 elderly individuals had achieved what entire armies couldn't. They had united humanity, inspired courage, and demonstrated that wisdom and strategy could overcome overwhelming odds. Their legacy would endure long after the war ended. Though the planet was scarred and battered, there was a sense of renewal in the air. Survivors began rebuilding their homes, planting crops, and searching for loved ones. Governments reformed, vowing to never let such devastation happen again. And at the center of it all stood the Silver Vanguard, humble heroes who had saved the world, not with brute force but with ingenuity, teamwork, and sheer determination. As William gazed out at the horizon, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Humanity wasn't perfect and its future wouldn't be easy, but it was alive, and that was enough. The Vorthak were gone. Their ships disappeared into the sky, leaving behind a planet scarred but still breathing. The war was over, and humanity had won, not through superior weapons or numbers, but through cleverness, teamwork, and sheer willpower. Yet for William Carter and his team, there was little time to rest. The world needed healing, and the Silver Vanguard had one final role to play. In the weeks that followed, William became a symbol of hope. People from all corners of the globe reached out to him, seeking advice on how to rebuild their lives. He traveled with Margaret Klein, Harold Dixon, Daniel Owens, and Laura Bennett, visiting devastated cities and refugee camps. Everywhere they went, crowds gathered to hear their stories and thank them for what they had done. William spoke simply and honestly, reminding people that the victory belonged to everyone who had fought, sacrificed, or endured during the invasion. Margaret focused on documenting everything. She wrote detailed accounts of their strategies, tactics, and lessons learned during the war. Her goal was to create a guidebook for future generations, a way to ensure humanity would never be caught unprepared again. "We got lucky this time," she often said. "Next time we need to be ready." Harold took charge of training programs. He worked with engineers, mechanics, and volunteers to teach them how to build defenses and traps using whatever materials were available. His methods were practical and easy to understand, making him popular among young survivors eager to learn. "You don't need fancy tools to protect yourself," he told them. "All you need is creativity and determination." Daniel continued spreading the importance of psychological warfare. He encouraged communities to think beyond physical battles, emphasizing the value of intelligence, deception, and adaptability. "The mind is your strongest weapon," he explained. "Use it wisely." Laura stayed by their side, helping coordinate efforts between different regions. She organized supply chains, arranged meetings between leaders, and ensured no community was left behind. Her energy and optimism inspired people to keep moving forward, even when progress felt slow. "We've come so far," she reminded everyone. "Now we just have to keep going." As months passed, life began to return to Earth. Farmers planted, crops and fields once reduced to ash. Builders repaired roads and homes, turning ruins into livable spaces. Children played in streets now free of fear. It wasn't perfect. Scarcity and hardship remained, but there was a sense of renewal in the air. Humanity had survived its darkest hour, and it was determined to thrive. William eventually returned to his quiet home, content to live out his days surrounded by books and memories. But his work didn't end there. Margaret's memoirs were published under the title The Silver Vanguard, a story of courage and strategy, becoming an instant bestseller. Readers marveled at the story of elderly veterans who had saved the world, drawing inspiration from their example. Harold opened a training academy, passing on his knowledge to younger generations. Students came from far and wide to learn from him, calling him the man who taught us how to fight smart. His legacy lived on in the countless individuals he trained, each one prepared to defend their communities if the need arose. Daniel remained a trusted advisor to global leaders, helping shape policies aimed at preventing another invasion. He emphasized the importance of unity, urging nations to set aside differences and focus on shared goals. "We're stronger together," he often said. "Remember that." Laura decided to stay involved in humanitarian efforts, working tirelessly to support survivors still struggling to recover. She founded an organization dedicated to providing aid and resources to those in need, naming it after the Silver Vanguard. Her passion and dedication earned her widespread admiration, and she became a voice for resilience and compassion. Though none of them sought fame, their impact was undeniable. People spoke of the Silver Vanguard not as soldiers, but as symbols of wisdom and perseverance. Statues were erected in their honor, schools named after them, and holidays declared to celebrate their achievements. Yet William, Margaret, Harold, Daniel, and Laura preferred to remain humble. They knew the real heroes were the ordinary men, women and children who had risen up to face the impossible. One evening, years later, William sat on his porch watching the sunset. The scars of war were fading, replaced by signs of growth and renewal. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the battles fought, the sacrifices made, and the friendships forged along the way. Beside him lay a worn photograph, showing his team standing proudly after their final victory. Each face was lined with age, but their eyes shone with purpose. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, he found a young boy holding a sketch pad. "Are you General Carter?" the boy asked shyly. "I am," William replied with a smile. "What can I do for you?" The boy held out the sketch pad. On it was a drawing of the Silver Vanguard, standing tall against a backdrop of stars. "My teacher told us about you," the boy said. "She said you showed everyone that even when things look bad, you can still win if you don't give up." William felt a lump rise in his throat. He knelt down to meet the boy's gaze. "That's right," he said gently. "And remember this, bravery isn't about being fearless, it's about doing what needs to be done even when you're scared." The boy nodded solemnly before running off, leaving William to reflect on his words. As he watched the horizon darken, he realized something profound. The true victory hadn't been defeating the Vorthak. It had been proving to humanity that it could overcome anything. And as long as that spirit endured, the future would always shine brightly. William closed the door and returned to his chair. The weight of the world finally lifted from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. The war was over and the world was healing. That was enough.